All right. Great to see you all. Glad you like each other so much. That's great. Psalm 91. Some would say one of the better known Psalms, maybe even in the top 10. What it starts, he who dwells in the shelter of the Most High. I learned this week that it's been given the title of the Soldier's Psalm. There's a legend. It's called a legend because no one can verify it, that during World War I, there was a brigade that had a Christian commander. And this commander handed them out the Psalm 91 and said, let's pray this psalm every day. Let's live this psalm every day. Legend has it that they were in 3 of the bloodiest battles of World War I, and they had 0 casualties. I don't know if that's true or not true. Still known as a soldier's psalm, still recited, and rightly so, right? This psalm, if you've read it and been good students and done your homework prior to arriving today, it talks a lot about protection, a lot about God taking care of you, and a lot about God like always taking care of you. The challenge of that, right, is not suggesting in this church, but in some churches and some circles of Christianity, we like to use psalms like this or passages like this and say, well, if you were more faithful, then God would have protected you. If you were more faithful, then you would have gotten sick. And we would say, well, have you read Psalm 91? Because I take poetry literally. And so I'm saying, it says here that if I do this, then God's going to protect. And it seems like if I read this psalm every single time that I call on God to protect me in the way I want to be protected, He will show up. Yet, I'm thinking martyrs throughout the ages, as they're walking to the beasts or to the sword, praying this psalm, God didn't seem to protect. And I'm thinking of Jesus. I guess I can call Jesus the guy, right? That was closer to the Father than anyone in the past, present, or future will ever be. His life started out kind of tough, being born in a barn and then having to flee for their lives. And then as he begins to fulfill his calling, he's ridiculed, he's persecuted, he's spit on, he's smacked, he's beaten, he's scourged, he's poked with or punctured with a sword, right? I mean, and then murdered. And so maybe there's some context or understanding on how we need to read a psalm like this. Because we really do like absolutes, don't we? But maybe our understanding of absolutes aren't God's understanding of absolutes. And so we want to unpack this morning. And I'm going to start with a quote in one of the books we read in our preparation for this. We found this. And the last couple of weeks I had read my quotes, and you can be thankful because my wife said to me, like, if you're going to read a quote, you talk so fast, put it on the screen. If I don't understand you, no one else does. Yes, so you can thank her. So this is a long quote, takes up 3 slides, but I want us to embrace this thought about Jesus and his closeness with the Father as we engage Psalm 91. No one more epitomizes Psalm 91 than Jesus. No one lived more in God's presence, more inhabited the shelter of the Most High, the shadow of the Almighty. No one took refuge in God like Jesus, was delivered like Jesus, and trampled the dragon like Jesus. That'll come apparent if you haven't read what that's referring to. No one! Do we get that? Can we agree on that? That no one lived more in the presence of God than Jesus. Okay, let's get to the second slide. No one loved God or knew God's name like Jesus. No one called on God like Jesus, experienced God's presence in distress like Jesus, or was delivered even from death like Jesus. Maybe we're getting to a point of understanding in that sentence alone of how God views life. No one will be more glorified by God than Jesus, who has received the name above every name, and no one will be more satisfied than Jesus. And finally, Jesus is the fulfillment of everything stated in Psalm 91. Because Jesus lived out the fullness of this psalm, I want you to hear this, his people can take up their crosses and follow him. His people can inhabit the hiding place, the shadow of the Most High, entering boldly to find grace in time of need. Those who belong to Jesus can take refuge in God. You get, right, that Jesus is the embodiment of this psalm, fulfilled it completely, and then calls us to take up our cross and follow him wherever he leads. Now I get we'll never understand that idea of taking up our cross, because when we drive down the street, we don't see people hanging on crosses. The first century, they understood what that meant. Right? They understood taking up my cross meant I'm carrying my cross to my death. And so when Jesus says, hey, part of your job as a disciple is to follow me by taking up your cross, means that you're surrendering yourself to him to go wherever he may lead. And maybe this short-sighted view we have that this life is it, isn't how God views things at all. Maybe the fact that Jesus was murdered and died on a cross, and by the way, defeated death and rose again, we don't have to be so concerned about this earthly self, because God has an eternal plan for us. And maybe when I look at that eternal plan of how God might want to use me, maybe Psalm 91 reads a little bit different. Otherwise, why are there great followers of Jesus struggling with sickness today? Why are there great followers of Jesus being persecuted in this very moment somewhere around the world? Why are there great followers of Jesus who are facing death even though they're faithful to God? Because God, through Jesus, has another plan. One that our little brains will never figure out. We'll never understand how he wants to use me in this life, even for the preparation of our next life. You see, because even if I were killed today, and by the way, I hope I don't just drop down and die today, but if I did, I would hope you say that's the beginning of something new for him. There's been no loss there. There's loss to us, to family, and we're going to be sad, but that's a new beginning for him. He is on his way to fulfilling all that God had for him. So I want to start with these words, because these words matter. If you've read this, the English translations, and I've read, they don't do a good job with the subtlety of these words: shelter, refuge, shadow, dwelling place. Because our writer of this psalm, man, he uses variations of word and different words that if we didn't know what the Hebrew was saying, we might not read this exactly the way it's being stated. And so all these words are there, right? These places of protection, these places of gathering, these places. Yet how our psalmist uses them are very significant to the point he is trying to make. And so let's turn to Psalm 91, whether you're in the Bible, whether you're on a mobile device. I'm going to be reading out of the ESV today. I really like how that flows, and it lets me really address the word that comes across in English pretty close to what it means, but the Hebrew meaning behind it gives depth and understanding to what our psalmist is trying to get at. So let's start. Here we go. He who dwells. So this word dwells literally means sits or remains. Okay? So essentially is present. So sits or remains in the shelter. This word here for shelter means my hiding place. That's why we saw it in there, why we've seen it in the song, right? In the song is, he who sits or remains in the hiding place of the Most High. He who sits with God. He who is present with God. He whose relationship with the God Almighty is tight. He who desires to just be present with the Lord. Okay, so this first line is dealing with one who is present with God. Will abide, will live Love this imagery. In the shadow. Oh my gosh, can't you see God's shadow? But this word shadow means protection. A shadow of protection. So he who sits in the presence of God, he who just desires to be with God. See, that initial sentence isn't about protection. It's just a desire to be with God. So he who desires to be with God will live in the protection of the Almighty. And then I will say to the Lord, my refuge. This word refuge in this case, in this location, means my shelter from danger. I will say then, because I sit close to God and I'm protected by His shadow, then I can say my refuge, my protection from danger, and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. Because I'm close to God, because I desire that closeness, because I desire to sit in that closeness, God's shadow will fall upon me, and I can proclaim that I live within His protection. It's beautiful. Beautiful. Verses 3 through 8, and we're going to read them. 3 through 8 now deal with specifically how God will protect, what God will do, what God might do. For He will deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with His pinions, and under His wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness is a shield and a buckler. You will not fear the terror of the night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in darkness, nor the destruction that wastes at noonday. Okay, saying here's all these things you don't need to be concerned about. You need to be concerned about these things. God's got it. 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but you don't have to worry about it. It's not going to come near you. You will only look with your eyes and see the recompense of the wicked, or the downfall of the wicked, or the punishment of the wicked. I am certain Jesus, when He was calling out, saying, will you take this cup from me, which is the burden, might have had this in his thoughts. But it didn't go that way, did it? In the way this is stated. Verse 9. Let's get these words right. Because you have made the Lord your dwelling place. Or yours might say refuge again there. Because you have made the Lord your dwelling place. This means literally your living place, which could be translated home. Because you have made the Lord your home. Because you did, right? And think about your home, right? I mean, I guess for most of us, I don't know, we desire, we love, we feel comfortable, safe in our home. Because you have made the Lord your home, the Most High who is my refuge. Now that does go back up to verse 2. The Most High who is my place of protection. No evil shall be allowed to befall you. No plague come near your tent. Because you are near to the Lord, because you desire to make Him your home, God is there for your protection. For He will command His angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. On their hands they will bear you up, lest you strike your foot against a stone. You will tread on the lion and the adder, the young lion and the serpent you will trample underfoot. And then 14, 15, and 16 are as if God is speaking. Because He holds fast to me in love, I will deliver him. I will protect him because he knows my name. When he calls to me, I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will rescue him and honor him. With long life I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. I would say, though in our eyes Jesus being murdered on the cross doesn't seem to be rescued, but I would say in the resurrection Jesus was rescued. I would say in the resurrection, because he held fast to him, God answered him. And because God answered him, and Jesus lives today, we live today and tomorrow and the next day. So significant for us to get that, because it'd be easy to read this, it'd be easy to look at this psalm and say, you know what, well, I see you've got this disease, man, what's your prayer life been like? Have you really been close to God? Oh, I see that, things just don't seem to be falling the way you want, and you seem to always be, getting in trouble or persecuted, or are you really close to God? But yet, in this text, God ends by saying, holding fast to me, I know essentially what you need. I know the path to take you on. And we've got to stop thinking the day I stop breathing here that, oh, that's the end of it. No, that's the beginning of it. For those of us who live in Him, we have to live like that. For us to really pick up our cross and live like Jesus and go the way that Jesus wants to take us and follow Him wherever that actually might lead, which just for some of us might mean being martyred, for some of us might mean tremendous suffering, whatever it might look like. Even if we catch diseases of the world, cancers of the world, or whatever it might be, can we still believe that God loves me, will deliver me, protect me, will be with me in time of trouble, will rescue me, and will satisfy me with His salvation? Do we believe that? See, Jesus, I believe, embraced it. He said, Father, take it away. And the Father's like, oh, okay, no. This is the path I have for you. Jesus said to those disciples that were trying to stay close and trying to figure it out, like, look, by the way, this is probably going to be your path. Because you want to be like me and live like me and walk with me, then, you're going to have to do that too. So where does this go? Like, as you're reading this, and I know as we read the Psalms, like, are there really lessons in the Psalms? I mean, one lesson you could get out is, if I'm close to God, nothing's going to happen to me. Okay, I guess that's one you could get out, but I think that's probably going to fall by the wayside. You might get out like, if I stay close to God, God will take care of all of my enemies. Okay, maybe. You might say, as I'm looking there, like, look, I don't need to have any fear because God's always there. Okay, that seems pretty good, right? As I don't need to fear. It kind of says that I can just follow Him. And honestly, when I was first putting this together, I really felt like that was going to be my life lesson. It's like, don't fear. But then as I really started to embrace this, I would say the last 24 hours is kind of how I roll, is do a lot of prep, and then the last 24 hours I'm like, okay, God, make this sermon come alive in me. Really hit me that maybe it's easy to say to someone, don't be afraid. Don't have any fear. And when you have fear, you must not be close enough to God. But maybe there's something else in play here. Something else in play that Jesus surely embraced. And the martyrs that I've read stories about, they surely have embraced. That maybe it didn't cure the fear or take the fear away, but it allowed them to keep going and move. So I'm going to share a story, because in my head I'm thinking, like, how has this ever played out for me in my life? Do I have a story of what I'm trying to get at here? And so God remind me of this story. And so I hope it connects to you, this idea of fear and maybe what happens when I'm paralyzed in fear or stuck in fear, and then what happens when I take a step past it, even though, anyways. Okay. So as a teenager, I lived out in the middle of nowhere. I had dirt bikes. But then I had a friend. He raced them. And so something called motocross. Do you all know what this is? Motocross is outside, right? Mostly outside. You go over jumps, right? It's crazy. And I thought it looked fun. And so my dad's like, yeah, sure. So I go buy the racing bike. I buy all the gear. And I'm like, okay. I go practice with my friend. I'm like, okay, I'm ready for this race. I'm ready for this thing. Now, I don't know if you've ever watched a race, but normally you have like 20 to 30 motorcycles in a distance like this, and they're trying to get to a curve in a distance like this. So 20 to 30 down to like 5. And it's chaos and crazy, and, well, it's kind of dangerous. And so for the first year I did this, I raced in fear. All I could think about was crashing. All I could think about was getting hurt. All I could think about was I was tentative. I couldn't make decisions. I was tentative in my decision making. I was worried about that guy, worried about this guy, not wanting to do anything at all. And guess what happened? I crashed all the time. So much so, and I'm not exaggerating. If my dad were alive, he would be sitting here laughing and confirming this. We visited a different emergency room about every weekend in the state of Ohio. There's truth to that. I mean, I was taken in ambulances, my dad driving me. I mean, it's a good thing he had good insurance. I guess he did. He never told me he had to pay out of pocket. I don't know, but I was showing up in emergency rooms that whole summer. Oh, did he rupture his spleen? Does he have broken ribs? What's going on with his leg? Because I was living and racing in fear. And I crashed because I was tentative. I was paralyzed in decision making. And then my dad winter comes, you're not doing it in the winter, summer's coming, spring's coming. He's like, okay, you going to keep doing this? He asks. I'm like, yeah, I love it. He's probably like, really? I'm really tired of the hospitals. And he said, you know what? Trust your instincts. Trust your skills. Trust your decision making. And just go for it. Just go for it. And it changed what occurred. I began to trust that I could be one of the 5 taking the first curve. I began to trust that I could make the passes. I began to trust that I could edge around and get through the toughest spots. I began to trust. I didn't win. I mean, that never occurred, right? I never won. Whole bunch of funny stories about why that never occurred, but that's another day. But here's the thing. There were times I still crashed. So much so that I still have a screw in this arm that was put in to hold it together. Still exists. So crashes still occurred, even though I trusted, even though I made better decisions, even though I could walk and ride this path, and it was more successful, and it was really good, and there were still times that it wasn't. And I was thinking about that when I think of this, and I think of Jesus, and I think of the martyrs, and I think of those who I know in my life who have been close to Jesus and still got sick, and still were killed, or still were persecuted, is they trusted Jesus. They trusted Jesus as their protector. They trusted Jesus as the protector even when they got sick. They trusted Jesus as the protector even when they still crashed. They trusted Jesus as the protector even as they're walking to have their head chopped off or to face the lion. They trusted Jesus and they proclaimed Jesus continually as the King of Kings. They never stopped trusting. And if you go back to the beginning, I will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust. See, when I trust Jesus, I don't worry about the rest of the stuff. And man, I have to tell you, I need that. I need that trust. Because here's what I know. When I stop trusting, it takes just a split second when I stop trusting Jesus for me to continually move away. Right? This idea of being close to Him, I'm close to Him because I trust Him. Do you know anybody you're close to that you're willing to be next to that you don't trust? When I'm saying, I trust you in all things, Jesus, even though it seems like my life is turned upside down, I'm trusting you, I'm staying close. But when I look away and stop trusting and start to trust myself or start to trust other things, the closeness just goes away. But it's that trust to say, God, and I'm not saying trust in Jesus. I'm saying trust Jesus. Trust Him with your life, with your well-being, with your sickness, with your ups and with your downs. Don't stop trusting Him. Regardless of how you might zig or zag, regardless of how you might still crash and burn, don't stop trusting. In the stories I read about those who have been martyred, the stories I read about those who have faced more persecution than I'll ever know, their stories just littered, filled up, just deep with trust in the one who saved us. You know how Jesus fulfilled this psalm? He trusted the Father with His life. Even as he was being beaten, he trusted the Father. Even as he called out to the Father to end it, he trusted the Father. Even as he hung on the cross, he trusted the Father because he knew the Father had another plan. Church, can we live in that trust? How beautiful. Because by the way, there will come a day when I have my new beginning that I'll never have to worry about being hurt again. Fear will be non-existent. Pain won't be there because I will be in eternity with the Lord. Let's not be short-sighted and think this is it. If this were it, I'm not sure I'd be following Jesus. But this isn't it. This is a great it. This is a great it, right? There's a lot of beautiful things. There's a lot of amazing things. There's a lot of great blessings. But this isn't it. I'm living for so much more. If I'm to think like Jesus, if my life, if a sacrifice in my life would cause great blessing to one other person, why wouldn't I sacrifice? If me giving something up would cause a blessing for someone else, why wouldn't I give something up? If me giving my life would save one life, why wouldn't I give it up? So because he holds fast to me, in love, I will deliver him. God will deliver every one of us as we follow him. I will protect him because he knows my name. When he calls to me, I will answer him. Every time God's answered me. I will be with him in trouble. Are you in trouble? Are you struggling? God is with you. I will rescue him and honor him. Maybe not the way you're going to be rescued and honored, the way you want to be rescued and honored. But he will. With long life, I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. Oh my gosh, what a beautiful picture that will be. So church, as we read this psalm, it's a beautiful psalm. When you're looking for protection, pray it. Pray it. Every single time, pray this psalm. If you're looking for protection and you're struggling with fear, pray this psalm. God will show up and rescue you. Maybe not in the way you imagine, but pray this psalm. What a great psalm to pray. What a great, when danger is around and whatever that danger might be, what a great place to go to dwell in the shelter of the Most High and abide or live in his shadow. What a great place to be. Because the closer I am to that shadow, the closer I am to him, the more calm, the less fear I have. So trust Jesus with this life and the next. Trust Jesus. Whatever big decision you're trying to make, trust Jesus. Whatever fear you might be living in, trust Jesus. Whatever disease you might be battling, trust Jesus. Whatever big calling God is maybe placing on your life, trust Jesus. Whatever new thing he might be bringing to you, trust Jesus. Whatever little thing he wants you to continue, trust Jesus. As we do that, God honors us, God has us, God will deliver us as God so chooses. So let's spend a minute before Marissa comes or as Marissa comes, whatever that is, to just thank God for his provision. Or maybe you need to say, God, woof, I haven't been trusting. Man, I want to. Maybe you're struggling even in fear, like say, God, man, help me. Help me walk through this. Help me understand. And maybe the new thing, God, whatever, you get it, right? Just spend a few moments with the Lord and see what he wants to speak to you this morning. Thank you, Lord Jesus, for the life you lived, for the life you gave, so that you could give life again. Lord, there's nothing that compares to being at home with you. Man, I try a lot of things, but there's nothing that compares to being home with you. I trust you for my provision and my well-being and my shelter and my finances. Lord, I pray for this group of people, for all of us, myself included. Lord, that we would be at home with you, even when it doesn't seem like it's going so well. Would we not waver in our trust of what you might have for us? Would we not waver in where you might be leading us? May we not waver, but may we stay at home with you. God, it doesn't mean we're not going to crash still. It doesn't mean that there might still not be some struggle or challenge. It doesn't mean that even this body won't fail. But it means I can trust that you've got something else. And that something else might be eternity. But God, we want to live in our trust of who you are and what you do. Be as close to you as we can every moment of every day. Thank you for being our home. Thank you for being our place. We love you.